All right, friends, thank you for joining me here today on the Tell It Like It Is podcast. Thank you for joining me today. I have a very special guest for us. Raul, how are you today?
Wonderful, wonderful. I can't complain. Things can't be any better. How are you doing?
I'm feeling good, man. Thanks for coming on the show today. I really
My
appreciate that.
pleasure. My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
I tell you what, man. I'm gonna start it off like this.
Uh-huh.
I really wanted to have a talk show that was conscious, fun, relatable, and
Mhm.
also serve the greater good. So along the way, I'm really trying to, knock on the certain doors of people who I think have a good energy for that.
Thank you.
I definitely came to mind.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Likewise. Thank you so much.
So for most of the audience who don't know, Raul, I haven't seen you in a while. It's probably been
Yeah,
maybe,
it's been years. It's been a
yeah,
long time. Yeah, yeah. We were roommates in college, and that was an amazing experience. But life has this funny way of bringing people back into your lives, which is a great thing.
yeah. I mean, social media is very good for that.
Mm. Yeah.
Keeping people in the loop. Like without social media, I would have lost contact with a lot of people, and
Right.
not for any ill intent, but life gets busy, and
Right.
social media works like a phone book.
Right. It gives you those good reminders and the bad reminders.
But we all learned from it along the way.
That's true. Very, very true.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
When did you want to be a teacher? When did you realize that?
I think I wanted to be a teacher when I was really young. I mean, about 17, 18 years old, I think. When I first, I didn't realize I was going to go to college until I actually took my SATs, and I did really well. And then I started thinking about, okay, what kind of careers would I get into? Honestly, I thought I was going to be a bartender and marry some chick in Corona. I never realized I would go to college and do these different things. But it's beautiful. I mean, honestly, when I first got into college, my godfather was a really prominent figure in my life. And he was a father figure to me. My father and my mother had some problems when I was growing up. But my godfather was one real constant, and he's a teacher. And for some reason or another, I have a lot of little cousins, and a lot of them followed me around when I was younger. So I kind of took a mentor role, a teacher role with them as well. So all those factors kind of joined in and pushed me towards teaching. And I'm glad it did. I mean, it's the best decision I ever made. It really
Now,
is.
freshman year in college, were you thinking I'm gonna teach?
No, not at all. I mean, honestly, I had some inklings that it would be something nice to get into, but my freshman year, I was kind of trying a lot of different hats. I was looking at different general education courses. I was looking at different kinds of careers. I didn't have one in particular. I know we had a set curriculum for things that we had to take to graduate. So I was kind of floating through those and seeing what felt good.
And then at what point the teacher bug became clear?
I think there was a girl involved.
It was Destiny.
And I took a class, and hey, thanks, shout out to her, whoever she might be.
And she's probably not a teacher right now.
Right? Yeah, exactly. No, but honestly, yeah, it was something where I took a course and I fell in love with it. I really fell in love with it at the very beginning. There was a professor. I forgot his name. I believe it's Professor Morales. He passed away, unfortunately. God bless. But he was really good, and he gave me my first taste of what teaching really could be.
Gotcha.
Mhm.
Now, so you've been a teacher in the public school system for how long?
13 years.
13 years.
Yes,
All right.
sir.
You've seen your share.
Oh yeah, 100%. I came at a really weird time, a really revolutionary time in the education system in the New York City Department of Education. When I started teaching is when back in the days, there was this whole stereotype about how teachers could like stay alive and they would get tenure and they would, never lose their job no matter what they did. So I came into the DOE at the end of that era and at the beginning of the new era where it's a lot more about accountability and, you have to really fight to get tenure. My class actually was the first group that actually had to, write a portfolio and create something for tenure. So it was definitely very interesting. I was actually the only person in my group that got tenure, my group of friends that started the same year. So it was definitely a really interesting time to be a teacher.
Did those people stop teaching or they took it again or what?
A lot of them did, surprisingly. Surprisingly, teaching is a lot tougher now, and a lot of people just couldn't hack it. I think the ideas, the preconceptions that a lot of us had going into teaching really got shattered when they really started teaching in the DOE. You know, a lot of people go in there with underfunded schools, not a lot of resources, and there's a lot of accountability. So a lot of teachers gave up. I think with the group that I started with, I think only one or two are still teachers.
So do you think that it was a good process to weed out the non-good
Absolutely.
teachers?
Absolutely. Our kids deserve the best, survival of the fittest. If you're not a good teacher, you know what I'm saying, you should be out of here. I mean, I don't think there should be a lot of leeway when it comes to that. A lot of teachers got away with a lot of really heinous things in terms of, you know, not teaching the kids, not working as hard as they should, you know, lethargic teaching practices. And now you don't see as much of that. I mean, there's a lot more accountability. So I'm happy that, that's in place.
So what about the people who already had tenure at that point or
Oh, they're good. They're grandfathered in. They're there's no getting them out. But honestly, now that the pandemic happened, the city is offering new incentives to get them to retire early. So a lot of them are, because it is hard. I mean, now, especially with the pandemic, there's so much more focus on technology, on being able to be computer savvy, internet literate. And a lot of the older teachers just can't hack it. And a lot of them are retiring.
um, any word on the fall for you? Are you going to be back in the classroom? What did they
Been
say?
back in the classroom all year. I've been in there since October. We get, you know, kind of like shuttled in and out because a lot of times the kids, if they have a positive COVID test, we have to get out of this classroom for about 2 weeks. We quarantine and we come back in. So we've gone in and out about 6 or 7 times at least, in and out of the building. But I really believe that next fall in September, it's going to be a lot more
Back to normal.
in-person learning and a lot less remote learning. I think there will still be some remote learning, but this year it was almost 80% remote learning and 20% in-house. And I think it might be the other way around in September.
From your mouth to God's ears. For a parent,
Absolutely.
it's really tough, you know?
Yeah, yeah. And
You,
for a teacher too, even for a kid.
yeah. Yeah, everyone had their share this year.
Hmm.
Definitely so.
Yeah.
Um, now, I have a couple of people come on
Uh-huh.
leading up to this, and one of the reoccurring topics that I think is very important is education.
Absolutely.
Now, I know you're a good teacher. I know
Thank you.
you have the
Appreciate
passion. I know, I've seen so many things that you've done over the years, and you've shared little glimpses and pieces, high-fiving
it.
students, and
Mhm.
you know,
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I definitely gotta make that connection. I think that's, you know, really, really important. Hmm.
and I have to be honest with you, even when we were in college, you had, like you said, the little kids would follow you around. You know, you were like my big brother freshman year.
That was a crazy year. I think we were both finding ourselves that year. It was a really interesting time.
That's what college is about.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, my brother, he's one
Uh-huh.
he's 1 year older than my son, and so
Really?
my son's turning 16, my brother's turning 17. So my son, he's
Uh-huh.
going to be a junior in high
Right.
school, and my brother, he's going to be a senior in high school.
Wow. That's great. Is your brother in New York? Or I mean, I'm sorry,
He
in
lives with us.
Princeton? Really? Nice.
Yeah, he's been with us since he got into high school.
Okay. That's an amazing dynamic.
Yeah.
Because your brother and your son, they're so close in age, they must be good friends and they must have a weird relationship because that's his uncle.
Yeah, exactly. They grew up together. They grew up together.
Uh-huh.
Um, so many things. So I always say to him, college is a different animal than high school.
It is. It
You
really is.
you can kind of stumble your way through finding yourself, but I think when you get to college, there's a certain amount of focus that's needed.
Right. I think that high school is all about fitting in. You know, a lot of kids want to fit in. And in college, it's more about finding yourself. You know what I mean? I think that college kind of gives people the freedom to be more independent, to be more of themselves, to be that unique self. And high school is more about the herd mentality. Everybody wants to fit in, everybody wants to be a part of the clique or whatever it is. I think that is definitely a big, big jump. You know, and that first taste of independence, I mean, you can attest, both of us took that very, very to
But
that
see,
strongly.
this is what I was saying to him. I was saying to him that an 18-year-old in college, for the most part, most people are not prepared for that.
Not at all. None of us have any idea what we're doing.
You're
It's
not
our
ready
first taste
for
living on our own.
right. You're not ready for 9 a.m. classes. Meanwhile, you were in a dorm room all night. Like
Right. Right. You're not ready for the accountability that it takes to be able to party and still do your schoolwork and still be able to, function on both ends.
I encouraged him because I know some people who did. I said, hey, maybe you can think about the military because the military is a good way for a young man to kind of, do his wild oats thing and
Hmm.
get some maturity, get some life experience.
Hmm.
When you're in the military, you can kind of goof around and have a drinking night, and Monday you get back to it. So by the time you finish 4 years and now you show up to college, you're 21, 22, you already played around, you have that discipline, and now you're ready to attack college. What do you think?
I mean, honestly, it's a double-edged sword. On one hand, it's just great discipline. It teaches you discipline. It teaches that self-control that you need as an adult. But on the other hand, I think that it kind of forces you to lose a lot of your creativity, a lot of your flexibility, a lot of your I don't know, je ne sais quoi, like, that essence. I feel like being able to be creative, being able to go to, these kinds of experiences where you're 17, 18, and you're, just going out and being a little more independent. I think it gives you a different kind of experience. I wouldn't trade our college experience for anything. I mean, honestly, I thought about the armed forces actually, but I didn't like the whole idea of, the regimented, the brainwashing, all that stuff. It kind of I mean, I'm not saying anything bad about the armed forces. I'm just saying that it wasn't for me. You know what I'm saying?
But in a lot of ways, college is not, the way you're making it sound either. You jump
Really?
right into your major, you have
Yes.
to worry about classes, you have to do this writing style. It's very regimented as well. You don't go to college to oh, I'm gonna try this class and the like, no, most people, the thing with college nowadays is that
uh,
it's coming more and more into a job training.
true, true. But I think you're forgetting about our freshman year of college because there was nothing regimented about anything we did.
That's what I'm saying. You lose a year, I mean, the
Yeah.
average person, if that's all you lose, you know what I'm saying? I don't know. I can't feel, knowing what I know about colleges in general. And mind you, his mom has worked in
Yeah.
colleges his entire life. So
Oh, he's been
we
around it.
we've been around colleges for the last 16 years, right?
Yeah.
And it's not the best way to learn, you know?
Yeah, but I mean, you got to admit, it gives you freedom. It gives you the freedom to fail. It gives you the ability to meet all kinds of people, all kinds of perspectives. You get a chance to kind of like learn a lot of critical thinking skills, that you wouldn't necessarily learn in the armed forces. You know what I mean?
But that's the thing, combining the two.
No, I hear you. But if you do that, he's going to be what, 21, 22 when he first starts college. So, I mean, don't get me wrong. You're 100% right. It does give a good, head start in terms of the money, in terms of the funds to go to college. But I don't know. I mean, maybe it takes him back a little bit because when he's graduating college, some people who were in his field or whatever will have already been graduated for about 4 years.
But America loves veterans too.
That's true. That's very true,
You
especially
know,
when it comes to home owning, different kinds of things
yeah,
like that.
you
There are a lot of incentives.
show up to a place saying I have 4 years under my belt as well as college, blah blah blah. Like, you know,
Right.
my biggest hurdle is I told him, I'm like, I don't want you to go in there and become one of these bad stories in the military.
Right, the PTSD kind of stuff. Yeah,
Like,
that's scary.
there's a lot of
That's
things
super
that happen
scary.
in in the armed forces. This is America,
Right,
so a lot of things can happen. So
right,
if I could guarantee that none of those crazy things would happen, I think it's a good
right.
bet.
Yeah, but you can't. That's the thing. You can't guarantee that. You have to, that's a really big roll of the dice.
Yeah.
I mean, honestly, you're right. I definitely thought about that too. If my son came to me and told me a little bit about joining the armed forces, I would be a little hesitant myself because there are a lot of scary stories that you hear about it and kind of, shies you away from the idea.
Yeah, but it is what it is. It is what it is. So for him, now with the pandemic, they're talking about seniors taking more time to graduate. Have you heard anything about this?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, it's really tough. Some people are, I mean, honestly, the grades, we can't really grade the way we normally grade. It's either pass or fail. And honestly, it's not, no one wants to fail anybody, especially with the pandemic. No, it's not really a fair shot.
Yeah.
There are students, I have students who are in homeless shelters. I have students who don't have access to the internet. So I can't get, mad at them if they don't do an assignment or if they're not online at a certain time. As long as they're there and they show a willingness to learn, I'm 100% with them. So I feel like the students are being graded differently, especially seniors in high school. It's really tough because how do you, use college admissions, at this stage? You know what I mean? Somebody can't take SAT at home on the computer. It's impossible. You cheat. You know what I'm saying? So it's like, I feel like a lot of students in that age group are getting the short end of the stick.
All right, I'm gonna jump around a little bit. I One of the things that I was saying came up before was charter schools.
Yes.
Now you're on the DOE side, the
Right.
BOE side, right?
Right. Yeah, I'm a public school teacher. Yeah.
So you've heard that side of the story very heavily.
Right. Yeah. There's a lot of talk about charter schools. I'm of the mind that, competition is good for any field. I feel like charter schools are great. There are a lot of really good examples of charter schools, the Success Academy, Knowledge is Power, the KIP Academy. They're really good charter schools. There are also really bad charter schools, but the truth is, they should all have a chance to be able to prove their strategy, their success, their structure. If it works, then we should definitely benefit from it. We should definitely give them public funds to be able to promote those programs. I feel like they should have to go into the same they should have to go under the same guidelines that public schools do. Like for example, I mean, there's always talk. I've never seen this firsthand, but the rumors are that there's certain charter schools that they don't accept special education students, or they're very quick to throw kids out if they're not up to snuff, so to speak, academically, or if behavior wise, if there's any issues, they're very quick to kind of push them out. You know what I'm saying? Push them out politely.
I
And
tell
those
you,
are rumors. Yeah.
Dalen, my oldest, he
uh
he went to Success Academy from first to fifth grade.
okay.
So February of fifth grade, we pulled
hmm
him out because we were moving to Princeton.
hmm
So we had 5 years with Eva Moskowitz and the Success Academy.
Oh, how'd you like it?
So in my personal experience, it was stricter.
Right.
They had more accountable more accountability and expectations from parents,
Right. Right.
and they had higher expectations of the students. and,
Absolutely.
and those things are the things that public school definitely needs more of.
Right. But if you think about it, right, the kids or the parents that push their kids into those kinds of schools, those parents are already really focused. They're really involved. You know what I'm saying? So that gives them a really big head start. So the kids that are going into those schools have that big advantage. And I think that it's a really great program. I just want to make sure that, it's a level playing field when it comes to, I'm saying the guidelines in terms of the playing field, so to speak.
Do you know anyone who went to Georgia?
No, actually I don't. I don't know anybody who teaches at a charter. No,
Okay.
no.
I mean, yeah. So yeah, I don't want to like put you in a position to say anything you shouldn't say,
Yeah.
right?
Oh, actually, I'm sorry to interrupt you. Actually, I do know somebody who's in a charter school. Yeah, he complained a lot about the fact that it was a little bit robotic. Like there wasn't a lot of focus on the liberal arts. There wasn't a lot of focus on socio emotional development. Um, and he complained about that, and also the fact that like the teachers are really pushed to a different level than the DOE. Like because the union is so weak or non-existent in the charter schools, they do have they get pushed around a little bit by administration.
Yeah. So I would say I saw all of those things, but
hmm
I think basically the idea is that with the union that the board has, it's
hmm
given a lot of leeway. And leeway for everyone to make mistakes or not be as accountable. And
Hmm.
with the charter, you have less of that. So there's more of a stricter, experience.
Right.
Now, I'm not saying that, charters have it all figured out, but I think it's a very interesting dynamic going on because there's a lot of schools that's really doing very poorly.
Right. 100%. Yeah,
So
and I feel like a lot of this. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
yeah, yeah, I want to hear from you.
Well, I feel like a lot of schools, like there are so many great success stories, like the Harlem Children's Zone. Have you heard about that with Joffrey Canada? I mean, it's incredible, incredible. I remember I saw the movie Waiting for Superman, and I was so inspired by Joffrey Canada and his structure in the Harlem Children's Zone that I actually went to a hiring fair for their school. And let me tell you, there were at least 100 people there, 100 teachers, all vying for like 6 jobs or something like that. It was intense. And I remember looking at it, like, wow, like this, there's a lot of like, there's a lot of, there's a lot of supply of teachers that really want to get into that kind of system because it's so successful, right? But then you go to a different charter school that might not doing so well, and it's the total opposite. You know what I mean? So it is a little bit tough. You know?
So one of the things that happened, just so
Mhm.
you know my perspective, was that Eva Moskowitz, she was always trying to open a new school, open a new location, open new grades, and she is an ex board of ed
Right,
employee, and now she was one of them turned into the enemy. And
right. I don't think it's the enemy, but yeah, I hear what you're saying.
yeah, now she's on the other side.
Right, 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 right.
And so a lot of things she was asking them for or pushing them
Uh-huh.
to do is stuff that she had firsthand experience. This school's not doing well. Why don't we shut it down and do something that we know works? And
Right,
instead of doing that, that school drags on for another 10 years.
right,
And parents are scrambling to send their kids out of district, begging other schools to take them, and it's creating a dynamic. And someone like Eva, who's doing a good job that parents
hmm,
are happy with, she's saying, just give me more rooms. I will fix the problem for you. And
yeah.
Board of Ed is saying, no, wait. She's like, I got it figured out. Come on, come on.
Mhm.
And her test scores, if that means anything, are relatively good.
Right. No, I definitely see that. I mean, I definitely think that like her, especially her school, charter schools, the Success Academy is a really good model. You know what I mean? I really appreciate that model because it's strong. It has a lot of focus on the right things. But it does have also a really large focus, like you said, on the tests. You know what I mean? And for them, that's the biggest draw. I mean, that's their biggest measure of success, and that's great. I mean, don't get me wrong, but I feel like they're asking for more public money and they're saying we want more space and we want more space, but then other public schools who are in the same building, they're fighting them for the same public space. And the public school system is such a big machine that it's really hard to change, right? Because of the union, because of the bureaucracy, it's really hard to change something, even something small that makes sense. It's really hard to change because of the humongous bureaucracy. While as a charter school, it's a lot smaller, it's a lot more flexible. They can make the rules that benefits students. You're right, 100% right. They have a lot more flexibility and they should get more funds. I believe that, like I said before, competition breeds success. And if we have more competition, then everybody will have to step their games up.
So I think I think most people who it seems like it boils down to union power and
Yeah,
managerial salaries being threatened.
right. Yeah, I think the union is extremely strong in the New York City Department of Education. The teachers union is very, very strong. And when I was a young teacher, I resented it because I saw a lot of teachers getting away with murder, so to speak. They weren't teaching to their abilities. They were, everybody knew it. You know what I mean? I remember when I first started teaching, there was a teacher who she was very close to retirement, and she would teach younger grades, about first grade or something like that. I'm not sure, I don't remember, but she would go home for lunch because she lived very close by, and she would come back from lunch every day smelling like alcohol. And this is something I'm like, as a first year teacher, I'm like, what the fuck is going on? I can't believe this is happening. But I saw it and it was so shocking to me. But the union protected. I mean, it obviously there was a lot of factors in play. But this is something that I saw happen repeatedly, and I'm like, how is this person not fired? How is this person still teaching? Everybody knows that she's not doing a great job. So what's going on, right? And I really resented it, the power of the union back in those days. But now, as I'm becoming a little bit more experienced, I see that sometimes the union does really good things, because there are a lot of cases where the administration is so tough or draconian, that if there's not a strong union in place, they would walk all over the teachers. So it's a double-edged sword. It's a very small, very delicate balance.
I think we need you in politics.
No, I don't like politics, man. That's a lot of lying. I
It's
can't
about
do
the
all that.
students. No, no, no lying. It's about the students. We need people there who are really pulling for the students, you know?
Yeah, honestly, I'm really happy that nowadays in our generation, there's been a really big uptick in a lot of younger politicians, a lot of, quote unquote, ordinary people that are going into politics more and more. That's a beautiful thing.
At some point, you're going to be 15, 20 years a teacher in New York City public school. And if you ran for something, I
Mm.
can see people getting behind it.
I appreciate that, bro.
Leadership, that same leadership that you had back with your cousins that I saw in college, that you use in the classroom, you really should think about it, because I'll be perfectly honest with you. That's a topic that's very near to my heart.
Mm.
And one of the things, and I think I was saying this last night, is that I remember, as being a part of the Success Academy, we
Hmm.
took a bus to Albany
Okay.
on numerous occasions
For the protests?
to protest.
Yes.
So what really touched me was the fact of, it didn't touch me until I was physically in Albany and I physically had the sign in my hand and we're chanting and we're marching, and I realized that my son is getting a substandard education, and I'm
Mm.
here protesting just for him to get the money that he's supposed to get, that I'm paying for him to get.
Right.
This was the kind of things that people were marching about 50 and 60 years ago.
Right.
And the fact it just all came so surreal to me. Like,
Hmm.
it's one thing to read about reading scores and these inner cities and poor communities. It's one thing to read about it, but it's another
Hmm.
thing when your son's in the school and you have that sign in your hand and you're like, we lived on the Upper West Side, like
Right.
Manhattan. Like, we're on the Upper West Side of Manhattan, and the
Like you would
school,
think the schools be amazing.
right, the school there was not that good at all. And we had
Yeah.
to fight to get into charter school. We had to fight to get out of this. First, we fought to get out of the zone school. Then we got into a dual language program that was still less than ideal, but better.
Mm.
And then we had to
Right.
fight to get into the charter school. And the charter school wasn't perfect. And they were
Yeah.
still getting pushback, even though they were better than. So it's not, you're doing the classroom work, which is important.
Hmm.
There's a larger issue here, and you know
Absolutely.
I went
I
to
think,
Jamaica
I'm
High
sorry, go ahead.
School in
You
Queens.
went to Jamaica High School. I teach in Jamaica.
The area
Nice.
of the school.
Yeah, I teach in, oh, I'm so sorry. I thought you meant, I teach in the school in Jamaica, Queens. Or did you mean Jamaica? I know you're Jamaican.
Jamaica High School.
Ah, yeah, yeah, yeah. I teach right by the Baisley projects.
Okay.
Is that close to the Jamaica High School? I'm not sure what Jamaica High
Jamaica
School.
High School was up the hill from Hillcrest.
Okay, okay, I know what you're talking about.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Jamaica High School got shut down, and I think it got broken up into smaller schools.
right, right. And that's a big mess too, because when a lot of different schools, have have to share the same building, it makes for a really uncomfortable situation, you know?
Chaotic.
Yeah, going back to what you were saying, I really like the conversation between equality versus equity. You know what I mean? Because I mean, we can say, okay, well, there are schools that are in certain communities that have really a large abundance of resources, and there are schools who don't. And it's like, okay, should we give them all the same amount of resources, or should we kind of lift the resources up depending on how much the need is, right? Like what you were saying before. There are schools in Long Island, that their parents, I mean, obviously the money from the schools come in from their taxes, but the parents are giving money for fundraisers. The school is getting a lot of money from the property taxes, and they have such an abundance of resources. Meanwhile, you go to a school like I said in Jamaica, Queens, and we're struggling. We're struggling to find pencils and papers and all kinds of basic resources. And that's the biggest issue, I think, in the New York City public school system today, is the fight between equality versus equity. We have to find equity. Equity is the most important thing, I think, for a lot of our kids, to have the best education. We have to have that equity of resources, that equity of funds, and balance, because I feel like a lot of the kids, a lot of the schools are being shortchanged.
Well, we don't have equality, and we definitely don't have equity.
Yeah.
So will take one or the other at this point, and we'll work on, you know what I mean?
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
One of the other things that I think I didn't realize, like I said, when you hold in that picket sign and you're in Albany, you learn things. And one of the things is that, New York City is dishing out funds about 30,000 per student.
Yep. 33. Mm-hmm.
And if you were to give that check to a parent and say, find your own school, find your own education, that would solve the problem.
Right, right. That's 100% true. I believe they have some states have voucher programs. I'm not 100% sure if New York does. I believe they do, but I'm not 100% sure. But
Well, it's
I
not.
think the voucher program is perfect, because the parents or the stakeholders, they should be the ones with the power. If the school is doing great, it should be rewarded with a lot of students, a very large population, and the ability to grow. If a school is not doing great, they should, obviously face the consequences for that. You know.
But again, if everyone's shifting their kids to these schools that's doing better, and then the school that's not doing well is not being funded, then you're going to have
Mhm.
principals out of jobs. You're going to have the failing teachers out of jobs, and I think that's what we're preventing from happening. The ones who are failing from from being restructured and figuring that out.
I mean, honestly, I gotta disagree with you there. A lot of principals are feeling the heat. There's a lot of accountability with principals and teachers nowadays. Being a teacher, if you have a ineffective mark, which is the lowest rating for a teacher, if you have that one year, the next year they come in and they have like really intensive support. They're with you all the time, and then if you have ineffective again, you can get fired. I mean, it's there's a lot more accountability. And with principals, when a school fails, the first person to go is the principal. So there is accountability, but you're right. It is a very slow moving train. Unfortunately, it is a slow moving train, but we're
Machine,
getting there.
slow train.
Huh?
Big machine, slow train.
Right, exactly.
I mean, we have to get drastic and shake it up. And again, I really wanted to come to you because I know you know a lot, and I know you're hands on, and who better than to talk to someone who has their hands dirty in it. And
Thank
I
you.
do want to
Yeah,
continue to encourage you to get involved in that political stuff,
I
because
appreciate that.
we need that voice, and
Yeah,
I know you're feeling the it's hard for you too to do a good job and when you don't have all the resources you need.
right, right. That's true. I mean, definitely. But the one thing I can say that's really great about the DOE that I love is they have a lot of funding for extracurricular programs. I'm sure you've known I ran a chess club volunteer work for about 5 years now. I learned computer programming and I taught that to the children. I started a club called A Scholar and a Gentleman, where it's kind of like a club for boys of single mother households. Kind of helping them, giving them that male mentor role. And a lot of those programs were not only encouraged, by the administration, but some of them they try to find funding, to push me forward with these programs. So the DOE does have a lot of good things about it still. I mean, you're right; it is a very big machine. It's a slow moving train, but the truth is, like, there are a lot of really great things. I mean,
And
there
again,
are a lot of, sorry.
I have nothing against the Board of Ed. I'm just, I'm more practical. If we can do this today and fix it tomorrow, let's do it, because
Right.
this big moving train has been using this excuse for more than 20, 30 years.
True. True.
So my fear is that 20 years from now, we'll be still dealing with the same thing. And the point that I always come back to is the system's not accidentally broken.
Right, right. It was meant to serve a certain population. You're right. You're 100% right. And unfortunately, people of color have gotten the short end of that stick since ever. Right. So you're 100% right. I mean, we haven't got the funding in terms of the disparity between the, I guess it's crazy, but I was reading something recently that said that we are as segregated in our country as we have ever been. And you can see that in the schools. I've this sounds crazy, but I've been teaching for 13 years in the New York City public education system, and I've never had a white student. I've never had a Caucasian student in my whole career. And I've had countless classes. I teach after school. I have extracurricular clubs that I do for the kids, and I've never had a white student. I mean, the segregation is real, and the disparity in terms of the resources is 100% real too. You're right.
So with this platform, I really want to get to the real issues and talk about them
Mm-hmm.
in a real way and try to break them down for regular people. Because I mean, my youngest is 10, and
Right.
even after they get older, I want to see the system be better.
Right. Right.
A lot of things are ridiculous, and I can go on, and maybe we'll circle back and include more of this, but it's
Mm-hmm.
a very serious topic, and I would love to get involved in making that better. And it's not a New York City problem.
Right, right. It's a whole United States of America problem. You're 100% right. You're definitely right. I mean, honestly, I have to say, like, I'm a little hopeful. I'm a little optimistic. I forgot who said it, but there's this famous quote about any real lasting change has to be gradual, right? Any violent change, any fast change that happens, it's hard to sustain it, right? Most times, if something is gradual, happens over time, it's more sustainable in the long run. You know what I mean? So I'm looking at it, that progress of the DOE like that. I mean, don't get me wrong. It's not perfect. It's not where we need it to be, but we're moving in the right direction. You know what I mean? There's a lot of programs happening now in terms of equity in the schools. There's a lot of things happening that weren't happening when I was first starting as a teacher. So I do see the progress, in terms of the accountability for teachers. It's much harder to be a bad teacher and stay as a teacher for a long time. But back when I first started, it was commonplace, right? The same thing with the enrichment programs. When I first started, there was nothing in terms of enrichment programs. Now we have ballroom dancing, chess, computer programming, and these are all programs, that are geared towards children of color, which is beautiful because a lot of things, especially the programming. When I first heard about it, I was dying to get into it because how many, people of color do you know are computer programmers? Not many. You know what I mean? We're extremely underrepresented in these fields. And there are agents in the New York City public school system that are trying to fight for, these kinds of programs to be instituted into our schools. So, I mean, being a teacher, being in the middle of it, I have seen a lot of steps forward. And I know that it's not anywhere near where we need it to be, but we've made some steps. You know what I mean?
You know what? I want to give a shout out to all of the Board of Ed employees who work hard and are good people, and they're trying to make the system better. And I don't think there's a lot of people there who wake up and say, I'm going to hold kids back this year. I'm
Right.
going to keep the system broken this year. But one of the things America struggles with is older people who doing things in an old-fashioned way. And when
Right.
these people are taking up board spots and vice president and senior this, they're getting big money to keep the system the way it is.
Yeah,
So
you're 100% right.
I'm sure we're gonna have gradual change. I'm sure 20 years from now we'll have a track record of 20 years of things that we did to improve the problem. But
Hmm.
my one of my fears is that, we've since the 1960s and Martin Luther King, we've had steady change for minorities and people of color. So my fear is that steady change, a lot of people will acknowledge the steady change, but at the same time will say we're not necessarily in a better place.
Mm, yeah. But
So
I feel like that's contradictory. I mean, like if we're making steady change, if we're making improvements, then we can't be in the same place. It's incremental, of course, but we're moving. You know what I mean?
well, you acknowledge that some people may not want to make the school better intentionally. Can you speak to that?
Yeah, I feel like a lot of bureaucratic, um, a lot of bureaucratic problems exist. There are a lot of jobs that are unnecessary. You know what I mean, in terms of the bureaucracy. You know, not exactly in the school per se, but in the Department of Education, the DOE. I do feel like there is some of that. Um, our last chancellor was Mr. Carranza, and he had a yoga instructor or something for himself, and she was making a lot of money. And I remember seeing that. I'm like, what is going on? How can we have these kinds of funds coming out of our city coffers? You know what I mean? It doesn't make any sense. So there is a lot of bureaucracy, there's a lot of red tape, and there's a lot of things that, you know, are unnecessary. You're 100%
You
right.
agree a private yoga teacher for himself?
Right. Something like that. It was something along those lines, but it was ridiculous. I mean, they were making about, I don't know, it was more than 100,000 a year. It was a lot of money.
They could have had two full-time teachers instead of this yoga teacher for this man who
Right,
probably could have went to
right.
the YMCA or something.
Exactly. So there is a lot of mismanagement of funds, a mismanagement of resources, 100%. But yeah, like I was saying before, like there is a lot of that, but there's more good than bad, I think. Maybe I'm just an optimistic soul.
Now
But
let me say this. I'm a very optimistic person, right? And we still have so much more to cover, right? But I'm a
yes,
very optimistic person. So I want things to get better, which is why we're having this conversation.
absolutely. And these are necessary conversations. I mean,
Right,
these are it's necessary for people to want more. We should want more for our kids.
exactly. So what I'm saying to you is that yes, we are making steady changes, right? No kid left behind. There's been programs in the past, right? They had programs in the 80s to make it better, programs in the 90s to make it better, program in the early 2000s to make it better, program in the early 2010s to make it better. So I know there are people who take this very seriously, who are smarter than me with a PhD and an EDD, and they're doing the work and they're writing the reports and they're showing up to those meetings and they're voting and they're pressing. So there's also a greater force saying no, 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 no. And what I'm saying is we really have to be honest and say, yes, we have these small steps to improve, but we're not making fundamental changes here. And
Right,
we have to have that level of honesty so we can at least say this is why and this is where we are, and maybe we're going to stay, maybe we need to at least call it out, you know. And that's the same thing with the police department. We know that certain things are not right, but if you have, you know, the president who can't fully say it and the police chief who can't really say it, then it's never going to get better. You need someone to say what he did was totally unacceptable. We have to do something now, as opposed
right,
to, oh well, investigation, and do that political thing. So when I say being political, that doesn't mean to do what they do, because
hmm
they aren't getting anywhere. I mean, someone who's really going to call them out, you know, AOC, like
right.
someone who's gonna, like someone with that kind of energy, who's gonna say fuck all the bullshit and just, you know, if you have to follow them to their house and take pictures and put them in the newspaper until they resign, like it's at that level, but we're kind of passive about it because we feel like no one's gonna do anything, and we all
Right. Yeah, I feel like you're right. There's a lot of stuff happening in terms of, you know, complacency, right? We're all saying, oh, you know, it's not that bad, and you know, we are making some steps, but you know, it's not that bad yet. You're right. You're 100% right. I feel like there are some things that we need to fundamentally change, but with the way the union is, with the way the Department of Education is, I feel like you're right. I mean, that's a really daunting task.
But here's the question:
Yes.
is it more important to appease the union or to educate our children?
Oh, educate our children, of course, 100%.
So our actions need to reflect that,
Right.
and that's the
Absolutely.
problem. and
Absolutely.
and you know, you can't solve that, but I'm saying that's the problem. And we need teachers who are willing to say that. We need parents who are willing to say that. We need politicians who are willing to say that. We need union reps who are willing to say that, because until then our children are going to be in the situation that they're in.
Right. I mean, you're 100% right. It's a tough situation because, yeah, the union is an American, you know, it's an American institution. I mean, unions should exist, But some unions, like the DOE, the UFT, or in terms of the teacher union, they are really, really strong. And sometimes that makes change really hard.
And again, at the end of the day, I don't want to see anyone get fired because
Right.
in my mind, you can fix this problem and not fire anyone. That means you take them out of that position, you take them out of that school, and you start reshuffling, right? And the ones who can keep going, keep going. The ones we can fix, we fix. And then the ones who need retooling or re whatever, we work on that and take that seriously. But we have to
Right.
be willing to do things in an unconventional way because the problem is not going diminishing.
Right. Right. No, I agree with you 100%. I mean, this is a big problem, and it's honestly one of the most important issues that we have to focus on as a country. Our education system. We're one of the lowest in the world when it comes to these kinds of placement tests, and it's crazy with the amount of resources we have here. We should be one of the highest.
We have anyway. How's married life?
Oh, it's amazing. Oh, my wife is actually right here. We recently moved into a new house here in Queens. So we're just kind of, moving things in, building IKEA furniture. She's wonderful, thankfully.
The house looks great. I can see a little bit behind.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, we're gonna have you over. I mean, honestly, everything is brand new. I was so happy we found something amazing in Queens. It was hard being in Long Island, being away from family.
Right,
Yeah.
right. Um, how long has it been since you got married?
Oof, babe, 4 years. I had to look at her for confirmation. I look up for a clue. I was like, yeah, no. But yeah, no, 4 years. It's been amazing. We've been together for 11 years. Yeah, I'm very blessed. Love of my life. She makes me a better man.
Yeah, man. Um, the last time we hung out,
Yeah.
what year was that? I had to
Oof.
maybe it could have been 2012,
I think it might have been. Yeah. Yeah.
somewhere around
Wow.
there, I think. I think
Right.
it was 2012, somewhere around there.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. It's been a little while. We definitely should do something.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
Yeah,
Speaking of married life, I mean, I feel like the pandemic kind of like tested a lot of marriages, right? Everybody's spending a lot more time together. Everybody's kind of cooped up in the home. So a lot of marriages got tested.
it's a very different dynamic. You were gone all
Mhm.
day and you'd come home and like reconnect, and now you weren't going anywhere. So it was like, wait, you're
Right.
still here.
Right, exactly. I think the pandemic amplified a lot of our issues in our lives. For example, if you were lonely, if you have an empty life, like the pandemic made it so much more obvious. If you are in a bad relationship, the pandemic made it so much more obvious. Thankfully, I'm happy everything was great. We spent so much time together. We haven't spent that much time together in years, because obviously we were both working. She was actually working in New Jersey. And so we were going from all the way in Suffolk to New Jersey every day, back and forth for work. So I think it was really hard on her, but thankfully the pandemic made things a lot easier. We're spending a lot more time together. So that was great.
The shift. Yeah. I think after this, things are gonna be a lot. Things are gonna be not like they were.
Right, 100%. Yeah. A lot of jobs that were, that went remote and were successful will probably stay remote. A lot of buildings in Manhattan, especially, they pay so much for rent over there that it's like, well, if I can have half my staff work remotely, why am I going to pay for this humongous building when I can only pay for half of the building? Why don't I have to pay for that and have the rest of my workers work remotely? I think it's going to be a big, big shift.
Now, at the time when you got married, what were you thinking? What you guys have been together for a long time. So
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
what motivated you to say, let's get a marriage certificate?
Honestly, like I think that we have been talking about marriage for a really long time, since the very beginnings of our relationship. I think year one we started talking about it. I mean, honestly, I knew from a very early time that she was the one for me. She's a wonderful woman. She makes me incredibly happy. So I was always kind of like I was the one in terms of the driving force behind the marriage. We met when she was really young. She was 20 years old when we met. So and she wasn't, obviously, when we first started, it wasn't like really the time. We weren't in our lives where we could get married, but we've progressed, we've grown together. So I'm really happy about that.
So so many generations are so many people in this generation, they want to get married later when they're more settled, after the
Right,
career is settled. It's not like the previous generation where you met in college and you got married right away and that kind of thing.
right,
Um,
right. Which is weird, right?
there's such a cultural shift going on, and nothing
Hmm.
stays the same. But one of the things that keeps coming up as a reoccurring theme is that the community dynamic is shifting. We are less interdependent on each other and we're more independent. So we have
Right,
less communal ties.
right.
And that also plays into the relationship as well.
Yeah.
So in a way, you become more dependent on the relationship, and you also have single people who think they can be independent without the relationship. So it's a big shuffle.
Yeah, yeah, it's a double-edged sword because like you said before, the older generation, they will get married much younger, but they were of the mindset where it's like, hey, listen, no matter what happens, we're gonna make it work, we're gonna fix it, we're gonna stay together, and we're gonna be fine, right? But a lot of people in my generation, your generation, in younger generations, they're more, they're quicker to be like, hey, listen, if it's not working out, I'm not gonna try, I'm not gonna push this. If it's not working out, it doesn't feel right away, then I'm just gonna walk away. I'm gonna be, my own person. And you're right. It does take away from a sense of community because there are a lot more single people in terms of, that single independent mindset where I don't need anybody, and there's a lot less of married couples. I remember when I first got married, well, when we got married 4 years ago, not everybody of my friends group was married. And I was shocked, because, I was 34 and for me, I was like, I thought that by 34, everybody would be married, everybody would have kids. And that wasn't the case at all. I think our mind shift because we're so focused on work, because we're so focused on ourselves. We have all these societal kind of like influences that push us to be more, I
Outwardly
guess,
cold.
on our own. Right. Yeah. It's pushed us away from that whole, the like you said, the old mindset of, hey, let's get married young and have that community, that family.
So there's so many things that's affecting everything at play, and
Hmm.
we're getting so busy. It not only does it affect the person you're in a relationship with, it affects your time for family, and somehow we're getting more efficient, and that's making us more busy.
Right. Yeah.
Before we had internet, you left work alone at Friday at 5 and you came back to it Monday at 9. Now
Right.
you have internet at home, you can check it at night, you can check it on the weekend. Like you're technically getting more done, but now you're
Always on
busy.
call.
Exactly.
Right. Yeah, yeah. I think that takes away from family time. You know what I mean? A lot of people are so engulfed in their careers that it takes away from that family, that family time. It's really hard to balance that work life. I mean, I feel like a lot more nowadays people are having so much trouble, balancing that, and it's taking a toll on our mental health as well.
And when people finally get a break, they go to Netflix.
Right.
I mean, there's studies on this. There's
Yeah.
there's so many studies on this, and I know the pandemic has kind of switched things up in a lot of ways, but there's so
Uh,
many things that's affecting us, and I feel like a lot of a lot of what's happening to us, we don't even have time to process it. We just kind of like we're hurrying through the stages, and we're like, yeah, I know I'm not healthy, I know I'm not taking care of myself, but I have to do this right now. And I know that I should be focusing on my relationships, but I got to make sure my bills are paid. And so we know it, but we're not doing it. And in the meantime, you know, the children of the community are being exploited, and all these other things are happening, and we're all like consumed with stuff.
Right. Yeah, people aren't taking care of themselves. I think 75% of the American population is obese, not overweight, but obese. People aren't getting enough sleep. There's a record number of calls for suicide, anxiety, in terms of psychiatrists, reporting the levels of depression. They're extremely skyrocketing. They're extremely high because, people, like you said, they aren't making that balance in terms of, mental health and wellness and work. You know what I mean? I think people are so focused on the wrong things nowadays that it does take away from your happiness as a person.
And I think without the interdependence, you
Hmm.
as an individual, there's more bases to cover.
Right.
When
Right.
when
Yeah, you're right.
when you had that cohesiveness, if you didn't have a haircut this week, it didn't mean that it wasn't a big deal. But when you're this independent person, you have to keep that independent look at all times, So I have to get the haircut every week, or I have,
Hmm.
these things that weren't as important 30 years ago, they're super important now. And there's no physical cost, but it's eating away at our time.
Right. 100%. Yeah, and going back to what you're saying about family, I mean, it's like almost like people are more likely to be islands, than peninsulas now. I mean, think about it. The size of the family has gotten a lot smaller, over the years. I mean, now a family is what, four people. But back in the days, I remember when I was growing up, I mean, a lot of families were very large. I mean, you had a lot more uh, of that communal atmosphere, like you were talking about before.
All of these things are very much pressing on my mind, and it's all interrelated. You
Hmm.
know, the availability of television is at a new height. With smartphones and all of these things, and it's all interrelated, right?
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, I think a lot of it has to do with the distractions instead of focusing on the fundamentals. Yeah. TV, cell phones are all distractions. So you don't focus on fundamentals like family time, mental health, wellness checks. You know what I'm saying? You're right. It's really sad, and I think a lot of times, if you don't make that time to really check to make sure your mental health is good, your wellness, you're feeling good about yourself and feeling as little anxiety as you can. I mean, if you don't care to do those things, you're really going to suffer in the long run.
Yeah, I think it's gotten a lot harder for people to survive. The mechanic jobs, the plumber jobs, and the hardware store jobs, they're
Hmm.
disappearing, and they're turning into Home Depot and these
Right.
minimum wage kinds of things that, jobs are
Exactly. Yeah.
still there, but they're shifting. They're going to a lower level.
Yeah, and that's taking a big hit. That's taking a big a shot towards the middle class, because a lot of those jobs used to be the middle class, and now those middle class jobs are disappearing, which means the middle class is going to be, getting smaller. Yeah, it really sucks because you're right. The disparity is shrinking. I mean, honestly, in the 1950s, I mean, the tax rate was about 80%, 90%, and it's like these billionaires. I mean, obviously, back in those days, there was a lot, very large tax rates. There was a lot of funds for public use. Now, the tax rate is 30%, and a lot of billionaires get away with paying even less. Some pay nothing at all, and it sucks because now that disparity is growing, and a lot of these high class are becoming so much more richer in terms of their money, and the people in the lower class, socioeconomically, are becoming even poorer. It's crazy.
So what advice would you give to your son?
Honestly, the best advice I would say would be, life is all about getting a good education, working extremely hard, and having a good plan, and revising that plan when you come to an obstacle. I mean, honestly, at this point, education is the great equalizer. I mean, the United States of America is not a meritocracy, but it's close. I mean, not close particularly, but honestly, if you really work hard, you can make it. No matter where you're from, no matter where you are. And unfortunately, we have a lot of disparity in terms of the rights and social justice issues that we have today. But thankfully, we can still rise ourselves above any obstacles we face, and education is the key to that. Making sure you have a strong education, a good work ethic, and making sure you have a good plan.
One of the things is that the echo when when someone does well in college, let's say they went to a good college, okay, and now
Yeah.
they graduate and now they have a good job, let's say at a good accounting firm. As
Hmm.
a person of color, they're being forced to fit into a place where they really don't fit in.
Right.
So
Yeah.
when you're saying get this education, the great equalizer, you know, you, you'll make it. Now you're sending him into that environment.
Yeah. And that's a really tough environment, because you're right. There is a lot of culture shock. There is a lot of inequality, and depending on the field that they go into, there can be a really they can't feel like a minority depending on the field they're in. You know what I mean?
They
Thankfully,
definitely.
thankfully as a teacher, I've always been in environments where there's been a lot of people of color. The majority of the teachers that I work with are people of color. It's a beautiful, beautiful thing, where because I didn't feel out of place. I didn't feel, out like an outsider. You know what I mean? But I can definitely see how some people can, depending on the field you go into or depending on the company you work for. You're 100% right. But we have to one fight obviously for social justice issues, but we have to also be adaptable. You know what I mean? And that's the hardest part, because sometimes, like you said, it does feel like you're an outsider. You do feel a little bit strange, in certain places, in certain fields. But we're going to break through those barriers. Like we said before, I've been teaching computer programming to kids for about 3 years now. And the biggest driver for me to do that was because, there is such a small percentage. I believe it's like 60% white computer programmers, 30% Asian, something like that. It's a really crazy numbers where African American and Latino computer programmers are like, I don't know, less than 5%, something very small, right? And it's just like that was one of the biggest reasons why I was like, we have to push this. We have to kind of get our foot in that door. We have to push and break into this field, and that's gonna, make it easier, because if we can get into it, then our kids will have much more of a, role model to look to, in terms of people of color being in that kind of field.
The reason why is because there's a lot of stories of people who got into these positions where they're one of the few of color and being out of place. And when we send our children to these places, it's a battleground. You know,
Right.
it's not just do your work and have a successful family. And these things, this culture shock that you mentioned, it begins to um, become a part of the next generation's problems, because now his kids are in the classroom with these other kids who are doing well, and
Mhm.
now he doesn't see a lot of people who look like him, and now he doesn't talk like the people who do look like him. Like, all of these
Right.
things are happening to
Right.
your kids, and this falls in a lot with what's happening now with the isolation.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. I mean, honestly, you're right. The people of color, they're much less likely to be promoted. They're not likely to have the same kind of pay as a white counterpart. You're right, there is that, but we have to be pioneers. You know what I mean? We have to break into those fields,
No,
and we have
no,
to.
we're there. You're
Yeah,
gonna
yeah.
find your black and brown doctors, with the PhDs.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
We are
But we
getting
gotta get
them.
more. We have to break more into those fields. You know what I mean? To kind of make it more commonplace.
Yes. I continue. It just that comes back to the income gap and these schools.
Right.
That as long as you have parents absent at work and kids
Hmm.
home unattended, they're gonna be on electronic devices,
Yeah.
and that becomes a great impact for your children. How many of your students know more about pop culture than the lesson?
Right. Exactly. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that's
It's definitely tough.
and that's holding them back.
Yeah, but I mean that's all around. That's everywhere. I mean, like social media, the advent of cell phones and kids using cell phones. It's one of the things that it's extremely hard because it's an obstacle. It's more of a crutch than it's a benefit. You know what I mean? Because a
Absolutely.
lot of times, kids won't learn how to multiply. They'll use a calculator. Kids won't learn this fact in history. They'll just Google it. It is tough because it can be a crutch. And as a teacher, it does. I honestly, I tell my students, of course, no cell phone use in the classroom when we're teaching, but all of them have a cell phone. I was surprised. I thought that only maybe one or two would have them, but I'm teaching, a block from the projects, and everybody has a cell phone, and it's shocking. You know what I mean?
They got to keep up on Instagram.
It's crazy. Yeah, it's surprising.
Yeah, man. Where in Queens are you?
Oh, I'm in Springfield Gardens. I'm right by JFK. Yeah, it's a beautiful neighborhood out here.
Okay, I used to live in St. Albans.
Ah, a lot of Caribbean people out there. It's a beautiful place to live. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
I've been to parties out there.
Now I know you're Peruvian,
Yes, Peruvian Ecuadorian. Yes.
and where's your wife from?
Oh, she's Puerto Rican.
How is that cultural mix?
It's beautiful. I mean, thankfully, everybody is we get along. You know, obviously our cultures are a little bit different, but they're mostly the same. But we get along perfectly. I mean, growing up in New York, I think that there is such a melting pot in terms of Latinos in New York City that a lot of times, you know, different cultures, different ethnicities, they all intermix, and it's a beautiful thing because we have so many more things in common that we do different. You know, I mean, honestly, a lot of the way we grew up is the same. Things we eat, the things we, everything was just pretty much similar. You know, there were certain obviously differences in terms of cuisine, in terms of the way we speak Spanish. But for the most part, there's a lot more difference. There's a lot more similarities and differences. You know.
I find that the cultures we most cultures have a lot in common, and it's the little
Mm.
things that we get stuck on.
Right, right. I mean, your wife is Dominican. You're Jamaican. Was there any cultural differences there in terms of
You know,
clashes or anything like
you know what? It's not cultural differences just means like the way you do things, you know.
that? Exactly.
And the funny thing about it that I realize now is that you could both be Dominican, but you're a Dominican family that does it one way, and I'm a Dominican
Right,
family that does it another way.
right,
So more and more you find, different people have different outlooks, and two Dominicans are not going to have the same values.
right.
So
Exactly.
yeah,
Yeah.
we had our share of differences, um,
Hmm.
but that's what the relationship's about, right? Learning and listening,
Exactly.
and
Growing. Yeah.
yeah, and absolutely, I've learned so much. We've been married for 16 years.
Wow, 16. Congratulations. That's amazing.
Yeah,
That's a
man, and along the way, you learn some things, and you
yeah,
learn a lot about yourself. You know,
right.
and how you show up and share with others and those kinds of things. A lot of people you
Hmm.
can't learn that until you're in it, right? And
Right,
you apply it as you go.
right, right. I think the biggest hurdle when it comes to marriage is just being able to let go of the individual desires, ideas, wants, needs, and moving more towards the collective, you know, moving more towards the us instead of the I, you know what I mean? I think that's the biggest obstacle for a lot of marriages, you know, because it is tough. You know, we get so used to, you know, to being independent, to being on our own, to have our own ideas and desires and wants, and to have to kind of like make that coalesce with someone else, it's tricky.
I often think, what exactly are we doing and why are we doing it? Are we doing it because we don't want to be alone? Are we doing it because we have like-minded goals? Like and everyone has a different answer in their mind, but I think that's always the first question. I
Yeah.
think instinctively, a lot of people just say, I want to get married, I want to have kids, and they haven't really processed that out yet. And when you're young, you have an idealistic view of things.
Right. Yeah, I think when you're growing up, you'd have this idea of, well, I'm gonna fall in love, and you know, it's gonna be perfect and magical and a fairy tale, and we're gonna get married and have kids at a certain time or a period. But yeah, life does kick you in the butt a little bit and kind of make things a little bit more real. I speaking for myself, I think that we were, like I said, we started talking about marriage really early in the relationship. I just I couldn't imagine having a better companion, a better life companion than her. So for me, it was a no-brainer. I felt like as soon as I met her, I knew she was special. I knew she was different. I knew she was not like everybody else. And I was only 26. Oh, was I 20? No, I was 25. I was 25 at the time. So I was like in my prime. I was a wild beast running through the woods. So it was definitely something that I had to think about because obviously like I was doing a lot of partying. I was in my prime in terms of the social life, but I knew from the very beginning. I was like, this woman is special. This is something I can, someone I can grow old with. So for me, it was more about, this is the person I want to spend the rest of my life with. This is my companion. This is the person I can really trust to be my life companion compared to anything else. But you're right. A lot of people do have that, that fear of growing old alone, or fear of being on their own, or, they do go into the marriage for the wrong reasons.
Um, I remember your mom and dad coming to the dorm room.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, my parents are beautiful people. They used to come to drop off supplies. I remember. Oh man, they're wonderful people. Thankfully, they're still both alive, doing well. I got a lot of my optimism from my father, and I got a lot of my hard work ethic from my mother. I still, obviously, I'm really close with them. I spend time with them a lot. My sister recently had a baby, so we're spending a lot more time together as a unit, which is a beautiful thing. I mean, family is everything. The older you get, I think the more you realize just how important family is, and just how much more important it is than everything else.
So you have two siblings, right?
It's weird. Like, for example, like, let me explain it a little bit. So between my mother and my father, it was only myself and my sister. My father had a child out of wedlock. She's my sister, my half sister. We have, and two of my cousins came to the country illegally. So my mom kind of adopted them. Yeah. So altogether, I guess about four.
That's how it should be, man. You know,
Right.
I had three kids because I wanted a big family.
Yes, I want a big family too. Yeah, I'm honestly, we're with my wife. We're going to an orientation for foster care because we're trying to foster. Because I think that, like you said, I mean, big families are the best.
Yeah,
And
God bless you.
you
Good
see
luck with that.
so. Thank you. Yeah, being a teacher, I've seen so many messed up things. Drugs. In terms of parents just walking out on kids. Like, they just really a lot of sad stuff happening. So I've been pushing for it for a long time, and I'm happy that my wife and I are going to be looking into fostering this year. Yeah.
That's a big deal, man. I look forward to hear more about that. Is it expensive?
No, I mean, honestly, that you think about adoption. Adoption is expensive, but fostering is a different story. Fostering, you don't have to pay. They're actually giving you money for food for the kids and everything, but it's a temporary
Right.
situation.
That's hard, man.
It is, because you make a good attachment to the kid, and you have to kind of like, be ready to risk it losing it. You know what I mean? Because a lot of times, the parent, they want their child back, they get off drugs, or they kind of find
Yeah,
themselves in a
yeah.
bad
You
situation
see how good you got
economically.
them doing now, and
Right, right. But I mean, I don't mind it. The truth is, if I can give a little bit of happiness or a little bit of light into a kid's life that's having a really tough time at the moment, I'll risk, that heartache or that heartbreak, because there's so many messed up stories of kids you hear where, I remember one of my classes, one boy, no, actually, this is my wife's after school class, that the boy, his mother chose to keep two of his siblings,
oof.
but put him in foster care. I mean, can you imagine how fucked up that is as a child, to try to understand that to try to like reason that inside your head? And I mean, like, there are so many cases like that. There was another little girl who was in my class that, she was suffering from depression and anger. And it was only because she went through a traumatic experience of losing her parents. And these kids, these stories are so sad, but, it really kind of like puts things in perspective. If I can do a little bit to help, shit, I'm all for it.
If you want some kids to foster, you can take two of mine.
Oh man, nah, I'm sure you're doing a hell of a job, bro. I can't do that to them.
I tell you what, man, you learn a lot from kids, and
100%.
I have plans in my head, like I want my kids to be like the next Elon Musk, something
Nah,
amazing,
man.
and
Nah.
it doesn't work like that.
No, I mean, honestly, all you can really want for your kids, like, truly, is for them to be happy people, for them to be good people, for them to be kind and generous and hardworking. I mean, the truth is, they can make $1 million or they can make 10. As long as they're happy and they're good people, I mean, what more can we ask for as parents? One lesson I learned when I was really young was that money can't buy you happiness. And a lot of people who we think are successful and happy are miserable on the inside. So for me, as long as my son is happy, as long as he's a good person, he treats people well with kindness and generosity, as long as he's a hardworking person who's always about growth, I'm happy. I'm happy, and he's happy. You know what I mean?
Yeah, man. Well said. It's not easy.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you. And it's harder now because there are a lot more influences now than there were when we were growing up. You know, social media has made parenting a lot tougher. Kids are getting a lot of bad influences, a lot of really bad ways to look at things, you know, and they're looking at different influences on social media and thinking, oh, this is a great way to make money. It's crazy. I have a little girl in my class this year who she was like, oh, I'm not going to get a job. I'm just going to become really big on social media and have Instagram pay me or whatever. And I'm like, what? This is insane, but this is her mentality.
A lot of kids.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's crazy.
my son wants to be a singer.
That's beautiful. What kind of music does he like to sing?
What is he like? He's like a pop song guy.
Okay,
Yeah,
that's wonderful.
he's recording stuff now. I'm trying to convince him to put it out, and
Uh-huh.
it's a lot of hard work. You know that, and I try to
Yeah,
make sure he understands that it's not an easy route.
right, right. It's a
Um,
tough road to hoe.
yeah, entertainment is not easier than anything else. It's tough.
It's actually a lot harder than anything else because I think that there's a much lower level of I mean, it's harder to get into. It's harder to stay in it. You know what I mean? Than other careers. You know, a lot of careers offer stability, but entertainment is one of those careers that doesn't. You know, it's tough. But if he loves it, I mean, hey, you got to follow your heart. You got to follow your passion. You know?
That's what I said. I tell him, these singers, they don't sing the songs they want to sing every night. They sing
Right.
what the audience wants. So
Yeah.
it looks like fun to be Rihanna, but instead of keep telling you sing Umbrella, you don't want to sing Umbrella anymore.
Right. You're sick of
Yeah, you're
it.
following around like, hey, sing Umbrella again tomorrow night. Three more. You're like, listen, it's a nightmare.
Yeah. Yeah. It's
You
tough.
love the song when you wrote it. Like
Right.
after a while, you're just like, can I sing something else? They're like,
And
no.
you may be a totally different person from the person you were when you first wrote that song. So you might not even like it. There are people like I look at different artists who refuse to sing their old work because like I'm not that person anymore. Yeah.
So yeah, I don't know if I could do it. I like to sing and I like all that, but I
Yeah.
need to, like, every day is a new day, and I couldn't stand that demand. And yeah.
Yeah. It's tough, man. That's a tough career to get into. What do you feel about that as a career choice? Do you feel like it's you know, in terms of him getting into it? How do you feel about it?
I think at some point, it's one thing to love to sing, and it's another thing to say, I'm going to make my living from singing.
Right. Exactly. Yeah, the stability is not there in terms of that. And that's scary for a parent.
And if you're not Adele or,
Or Beyonce or
yeah,
somebody. Yeah.
no, but Beyonce, I think Beyonce worked harder than Adele.
Right. 100%. Yeah.
And I don't want to discredit Adele's voice work, but
Mhm.
you starting at 6, singing and dancing, and like I don't like Beyonce for her voice. It's that package that she brings.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
Adele
She's a
is
great
just a voice.
singer, great dancer, all that. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. To me, Adele is primarily a voice. So if you're Adele, you can like just show up, stand there, be out of shape, and like, oh, 42 Grammys. Thank you.
It's
And
all
go.
good.
Yeah, yeah. She has that voice, one in a generation kind of voice. So you're not gonna get that. You have to be
Right.
willing to work like a Beyonce and grind and sing a million songs and do a dance routine. And so
Right. Dedicate your life to it.
yeah, yeah, exactly. Uh,
Hmm.
I was gonna say a little bit more about the podcast and
Hmm.
what's going on here. So there's a lot of podcasts popping up right now, as you can
Yeah.
tell. Why are you not on
Hmm.
IG, by the way?
I don't know. I never really got into social media that much. I mean, I'm barely on Facebook. I mean, the truth is, it just seemed like a really big distraction, you know, like another Candy Crush.
Exactly, exactly. No, no, no. To be honest with you, I totally get it. One of the main reasons why I'm still on it is because I grow so much on Instagram, and more so on Instagram than Facebook. When I
Okay.
look at something too many times on Instagram, I'm like, I don't need to see that again, and I unfollow. And
Mhm.
like, there's a lot of content there that I find inspiring and educational.
Okay.
those kinds of things lead to other things related, and I'm like growing in that direction.
That's beautiful. There are a lot of really good speakers that we find through social media that are incredible.
Yeah.
Eric Thomas is incredible. David Goggins, oh my God. And I've been hearing a lot of their stuff too. And I found out about them, honestly, through social media. So you're right. Yeah, it's amazing.
And you're not missing anything. So don't feel like, oh yeah, you're not missing anything. If you want something, go to Google. It's also on Google.
Right.
And
Exactly. Yeah.
then you can click on a YouTube video and get it. But Instagram is just, it's a communal, it has a communal aspect, and people definitely rub ideas off each other, and that kind of thing.
That's what's up. Yeah,
So
maybe I'll check it out.
yeah, no, I would say stay away if you've been.
Oh, there we go. So yeah, that's it.
Yeah, because it's highly addictive.
Yeah, I don't want that. That's too much
Go
of a,
there,
yeah.
you're like, oh, I'm going to connect with other teachers and share my lesson plan and
Right.
and
But
grow, da da da. And then your
then
mom,
you end up looking at cat videos of cats for an hour. You know what I mean? Yeah, I don't want that.
then someone else finds you, and you're like, oh, what's this? And so a lot of things kind of, it's not,
Yeah.
yeah. So I think that in the age that we're in now,
Hmm.
with the access to technology, I tell my boys this all the time: use the laptop. We have more technology in our laptop than when we were going to the moon in the 60s.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
people had less than what you had on the laptop, and we got to the moon. So you can take that laptop, that phone, and you can actually do something. And this is what I tell to them, so I just apply it to myself. And I
Hmm.
think a large part of what I want to see now is us having real conversations followed by real actions,
Hmm.
and us forming bridges. I think, the communal style of the past is no longer relevant or necessary.
Right.
Um, so we're getting into a new model, and obviously for different people it looks like different things, but I think we have to figure out a way to interconnect ourselves to each other so that
Hmm.
we can make actionable what we want to see. And
Absolutely.
we have to take it seriously, to and that's why we started with education. So something like that, I would love to, let's say, have an education forum, a community forum, and something that we can mold and go forward. And I think I'm not about pressuring people in positions to do something. I think we need to do something.
Absolutely.
You know,
Absolutely. Yeah, definitely. I would love to join any kind of forum you have in terms of education or community. I feel like a lot of things, especially nowadays, like you said, I mean, we have to build up our communities in terms of the communities that we want to have. You know what I'm saying? In terms of like-minded people, in terms of people who are positive, people who are doing things, that you kind of want to push towards yourself. I agree. I saw a lot of your, actually, I've seen all of your episodes of the podcast so far, and there are a lot of really amazing people, that you interviewed. And I definitely feel like communities like that are really, really helpful, not only to the person in the community, but to everybody around it.
I mean, it pushes me in an interesting way, because I'm a big thinker, and
Mm.
I have utopia in my mind, and I'm like, all right, well, how do we actionably do one thing to get closer to that? What's another step? And
Right.
obviously, dialogue is a part of it. Um, in person. Um, I do believe in entrepreneurial endeavors, things like crowdfunding,
Right.
us investing in things together that we believe in, something that we can say the community needs this. Let's not wait for so and so to fix this. We can do it. Let's pool together and rebuild that church, rebuild that community center. And I think through actions like that, we can get that ball rolling,
Right.
and get that momentum going, because we do have the money.
Right, absolutely. Yeah. And honestly, we do have the knowledge as well. I mean, a lot of intelligent people have access to resources. And a lot of the people that you had on here were really, really smart people. They have access to resources that, they can help each other terms of if you have a problem with, let's say, building the church, there could be somebody in the group that can have, access to those kinds of, I guess, links to those kind of resources that would really help in that area. So I definitely agree.
Yeah, so this is the early steps. I wanted to do some one-on-ones to kind of get everything, the ball rolling, get people a chance to know each other one-on-one,
Yeah,
and have clear visions and understand what each person's going to bring, and kind of connect all these dots. It's a big undertaking, but we have to start somewhere.
definitely, absolutely. And honestly, I'm honored. I'm happy you thought of me. I mean, I'm really excited about this. Definitely, it's something that's a beautiful step forward. I mean, building those communities of like-minded people, of people who are strong in terms of that areas is really, really helpful for everybody. So I commend you for that. Definitely,
Yeah, man. Keep me in mind, and I'll definitely contact you and stay in communication about things going forward.
definitely. Thank you, my brother. I appreciate it. Definitely.
And bring any ideas you have to the table, and let's continue to grow.
Yeah, absolutely, brother. Onward and upward.
Yes. All right, man. Thank you so much for coming on today. I appreciate the conversation.
Likewise. Thank you so much.
Tell Jen hi for me.
Definitely. And likewise, Darlene. Absolutely.
All right, man.
All right.
Thank you again. Appreciate you.
Likewise. Have a good night.
Yeah.